Surveillance in a post-9/11 world's par for the course. But when news broke in 2012 of the New York Police Department going outside of its jurisdiction to spy on large swaths of New Jersey's Muslim community, people were a little surprised. The NYPD's violation of civil liberties by indiscriminately spying on another state's religious population seemed obvious. And in 2012, 8 Muslims filed a lawsuit against the city for targeting a community for its religion. But last week, a federal judge threw out the case altogether, alleging that the surveillance was not a violation of civil liberties because it conducted to prevent terrorism, even though no acts of terrorism were actually prevented from the spying. And while there's a similar case pending in Brooklyn, this ruling could set a dangerous precedent for the future. Well, earlier I was joined by Prof Kumar, professor at Rutgers University and author of the book Islamophobia and the Politics of Empire. I first asked her to break down why the judge justified the constitutionality of the program.
If you look at the background of this case was brought by the Center for Constitutional Rights and Muslim advocates on behalf of New Jersey Muslims who have been being surveilled for at least the last 12 years, since 2002. So mosques and schools and community centers and student groups and even grade schoolers, by the way, were surveilled. And the idea behind this lawsuit was to say that this is unconstitutional and this program should be suspended. But what the judge ruled was that actually no harm was done by surveillance, never mind the psychological trauma that New Jersey Muslims have faced, having infiltrators, in all of their institutions and so forth. Apparently no harm was done. Apparently the harm that was done was by the Associated Press, which broke the story. The Associated Press did some amazing investigative journalism for which they won a Pulitzer Prize. The judge decided that they were the ones who caused harm, not the actual surveillance. So here you have it in one fell swoop. You have not only the justification for racial and religious profiling, but an attack on the press, right? An attack on the Associated Press and the idea that the press should be watchdogs of the government.
It is shocking that they would actually go as far as claiming that the harm wasn't the surveillance system itself, it was just the press of the fact that surveillance was happening. I mean, what do you think about that claim?
Well, I think this is a completely specious claim. I think that this ruling absolutely sends the wrong message. It sends a green light not only to the NYPD to continue these practices of surveillance, but to police agencies all over the country that they can, with absolute impunity, violate the civil liberties of Muslims. But I want to read from the 10-page document that the judge produced. This is what he said. He said, quote, "The police could not have monitored New Jersey for Muslim terrorist activities without monitoring the Muslim community itself. The motive for the program was not solely to discriminate against Muslims, but rather to find Muslim terrorists hiding among ordinary law-abiding Muslims," which is just so deeply racist. It's a form of cultural racism that says that people who practice Islam are sort of programmed to turn to terrorist activities. And this is really the mindset of the NYPD. They released a document in 2007 called Terrorism in the West, the Homegrown Threat, in which they argue that there is a 4-step process of radicalization in which, if you're just a young Muslim man, you are already in stage 1. Mm-hmm. Then you become religious, you stop smoking, drinking, and you turn to religion. You're on a fast track towards jihadization, right? And this is really such a simplistic and problematic notion of why people turn to violence. And frankly, this is cultural racism.
Martini's a former Republican congressman, a Bush appointee. He's even been removed from a racketeering and murder case in the past for his lack of impartiality. So considering his past, how much do you think Martini's personal politics played into the ruling?
Oh, I'm sure it had a lot to do with it, because there are at least 2 schools of thought, if you will. The Republican school of thought, the more conservative school of thought, tends to be very simplistic in the way it views the Muslim terrorist enemy threat. And I have no doubt that that played a huge role in this.
How is the NYPD justifying spying on locations completely outside of its jurisdiction?
Yes, well, frankly, this entire program is not legal because a CIA agent was responsible for setting this program up. So first of all, the CIA should not be involved in any kind of domestic spying of this sort. So there is so many ways in which, what the NYPD should be doing, what the CIA should be doing, has been completely violated in this case. And, the case was actually brought by a man by the name of Hassan. He is a Army veteran and, I believe went off to fight in the Iraq War. But then he comes back and finds that his mosque is being surveilled. So, the logic is we'll send you to go fight for oil and so forth. But when you come back, you're part of a suspect community.
Unbelievable. Deepa, you mentioned kind of the message, the clear message that this ruling sends. I mean, expand on that. What kind of precedent do you think that it will set for future widespread surveillance by law enforcement agencies across the country?
Well, there's already been, since 2002, widespread programs of this sort. The NYPD is not the only institution. The FBI, various, local police departments have been involved in this. But the key to keep in mind is that in New Jersey, for instance, even though this program has been in effect since 2002, there has not been one single lead related to terrorist activity, let alone a terrorism conviction, right? And actually, this is consistent with nationwide statistics. In the 10 years since 9/11, of the 150,000 murders in the United States, Muslim Americans have been responsible for only 33 of them, right? And so the question is, why are so many resources spent by local police departments, by the FBI, by the National Security Agency, and so on, surveilling Muslim Americans? Well, what it comes down to, I think, really, is that we have seen the massive development and growth of not only a surveillance state, but a national security state that relies on this logic that there is a 9/11 around the corner. There are these horrible Muslim terrorists everywhere. So we have to expand this national security state. And ultimately, Abby, let's be clear, this national security state isn't about keeping us safe, right? You think about what Americans die from. They die far more often from things like workplace-related injuries. 45,000 Americans die each year from lack of access to health care, right? But there's no war on the for-profit healthcare system. What it is, I'm arguing in the next book that I'm writing, is really about the national security state that guards the interests of the 1%, right? And justifying that national security state is about creating this enemy and creating these programs that go after, by the way, not just Muslim Americans, but all dissenters.
Do you think that the election of New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio has made a tangible difference in both the approach of minority surveillance and stop and frisk tactics? Because I know a lot of people are kind of disappointed so far.
Yeah, I mean, rhetorically, I think it's made some difference because de Blasio ran on a platform where he not only rejected stop and frisk, but he also promised Muslims in New York City that he would curtail, this sort of blanket surveillance program, and only in specific cases where there was actionable intelligence, he would sanction this kind of surveillance. But to the best of my knowledge, Abby, he hasn't actually done anything about it. And the one thing that he has done is actually appoint a new police commissioner who, if you know who this man is, William Bratton. He was the chief of the LAPD. And while there, actually the number of stop and frisk cases expanded by 50%. And furthermore, he was part of putting forward, an LA version of the New York program. It was called a community mapping program, which was going to do exactly the same thing with Muslim Americans. It didn't come to fruition because there was a huge public outcry.
Deepa Kumar, professor, Rutgers University, author, Islamophobia and the Politics of Empire. Always a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you.